2025 WNBA Finals presented by YouTube TV. We'll begin with remarks from Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, and then we'll turn it over to question and answer. Please have
What happens when a league is handed the key to $1 billion future and refuses to turn it? That's the situation the Wnba found itself in. Caitlin Clark, a generational talent and full-blown cultural phenomenon, had been entrusted to the league, and as the world watched, Commissioner Kathy Engelbert oversaw a decision so puzzling and harsh that it left millions of fans, new and old alike, asking one unsettling question. Was the WNBA deliberately working against its own success? For decades, the league had fought for every scrap of media coverage, every sponsorship dollar, and every filled seat. Then one player arrived, and overnight the entire equation shifted. This wasn't just about a single spot on an Olympic roster. It was about a moment that could shape the trajectory of women's sports for the next 2 decades. And the decision that followed sparked a wave of debate, controversy, and genuine anger. What actually happened behind closed doors at the WNBA and USA Basketball turned out to be far more political and far more troubling than anyone expected. The rise of a phenomenon. It all began when a talent unlike anything the sport had seen stepped onto the court. Caitlin Clark wasn't simply a standout college player. She was a walking cultural event. Her Iowa Hawkeyes games didn't just break women's basketball viewing records. They obliterated basketball records altogether, regardless of gender. Her final college game, the 2024 NCAA Championship, drew roughly 24 million total viewers with an average of 18.9 million, the most watched basketball broadcast in the U.S. in 5 years, outdrawing that year's NBA Finals, World Series, and Masters final round. The message from the American public was unmistakable. People wanted to watch her play, not just basketball in general. That massive audience followed her directly into the Wnba once the Indiana Fever, a franchise that had struggled for years, took her with the first overall pick. A league that had spent 25 years trying to shake off a niche sport reputation suddenly became the hottest ticket around, pulling in an average of 2.1 million viewers per game. Clark's professional debut on ESPN2 was the most-watched WNBA game in more than 2 decades. Arenas that were used to modest crowds scrambled to move Fever road games into much larger NBA venues to meet demand from fans, many of them brand new to the league, eager to see her signature long-range shooting in person. Within an hour of the draft, her jersey had sold out, outselling every other player's jersey across the entire league combined. She was, effectively, a one-woman economic boost. The demand to safely transport the world's most recognizable female athlete became so significant that the league finally moved forward on chartering private flights for teams, something that had been discussed for years without action. It was, by any measure, the biggest boost the league had ever received, a different reception behind the scenes. While fans, sponsors, and networks were thrilled, a very different atmosphere was forming among the players themselves, the very people who stood to benefit from her popularity. In public, she got the red carpet treatment. Behind the scenes, something much colder was taking shape. From her very first game, Clark faced a level of physical treatment well beyond normal rookie hazing. Hard elbows, hip checks, shoulder checks, and hard fouls that officials repeatedly let go uncalled, as if they too were part of an unspoken initiation. It felt as though the league's veterans had quietly decided to test her, physically and mentally, and prove that college stardom meant nothing here. That undercurrent broke into the open during a nationally televised game against the Chicago Sky. As the ball was about to be inbounded, Chicago's Kennedy Carter delivered a hard, unprovoked shoulder check to Clark, who wasn't even involved in the play, sending her to the floor in what looked like a purely hostile act, with no basketball justification at all. The officiating crew initially called it a common foul, a decision so widely criticized that the league later upgraded it to a flagrant foul after the fact. What followed was even more telling than the incident itself. Carter refused to answer questions about it after the game, and cameras caught teammate Angel Reese, long viewed as Clark's college rival, jumping up from the bench to cheer the hit. It read less like a hard foul and more like a message, aimed squarely at Clark and the millions of new fans she'd brought with her. This isn't your league to walk into. That tension on the court was only a preview of a much bigger power struggle playing out off it, one that was about to boil over on the world's biggest stage. The road to Paris. For any elite athlete, making the Olympic team is the pinnacle of a career, and virtually everyone, marketers, analysts, fans, assumed Clark's spot on the 2024 U.S. Olympic roster was a formality. The only real question seemed to be when the announcement would come, not if. Team USA women's basketball had been a dominant international force for years, and adding the most watched player in the sport seemed like an obvious move, not just for her skill, though her long-range shooting would have been a real weapon against international zone defenses, but for the business opportunity it represented. The Olympics offered a once-in-a-generation chance to introduce Clark, and by extension the WNBA, to a global audience of billions. NBC executives were reportedly thrilled at the prospect of near-constant camera time on her, drawing in casual viewers worldwide who'd only recently heard her name. To the business side of the sport, her inclusion looked less like a bonus and more like a necessity for the growth of the women's game. The snub then, on an otherwise quiet weekend, the roster leaked, and her name wasn't on it. The reaction was instant. Shock quickly turned into outrage as fans and analysts tried to make sense of how the most influential player in the sport could be left off the 12-woman roster. The players who did make the team, Breanna Stewart, Diana Taurasi, and other established veterans, were unquestionably accomplished, but none carried anywhere near Clark's star power or ability to draw new audiences. To many, her exclusion looked less like a basketball decision and more like a political one. A snub, not just to her, but to the millions of new fans who'd been told, in effect, that their favorite player wasn't welcome on the sport's biggest stage. The backlash was swift and loud, spilling out of sports media and into national news. It became a broader conversation about jealousy, gatekeeping, and a leadership failure at the top, handing critics who already viewed the WNBA as resistant to mainstream growth a fresh piece of ammunition. Explanations that didn't hold up USA Basketball's justification for the snub, leaked anonymously to the press, cited Clark's limited WNBA experience and the importance of preserving team chemistry. Neither argument survived much scrutiny. Analysts quickly pointed out that past stars, including Candace Parker in 2008 and Breanna Stewart in 2016, had made Olympic rosters as rookies with no professional experience at all, undercutting the experience argument entirely. The chemistry argument fared even worse, widely read as a thinly veiled admission that veteran players simply didn't want her there, resentful of the spotlight that had followed her so effortlessly. The underlying fear, many suspected, was that the media circus surrounding Clark in Paris would be difficult to manage, especially if playing time didn't match public expectations, and especially with veteran players like Diana Taurasi seemingly unwilling to hand over the spotlight to a new generation. The official explanations, in other words, looked like a thin cover for something rooted in personal politics and internal league resentment. Engelbert's response. What really exposed the situation, though, was how Wnba Commissioner Kathy Engelbert responded to the firestorm. This was her moment to take control of the narrative, defend her league's most valuable asset, and reassure the wave of new fans that the Wnba was ready for the spotlight. Instead, her public comments were vague, defensive, and tone-deaf to the scale of the backlash. She repeatedly redirected attention toward the players who had made the roster while offering only a robotic defense of the selection process, sidestepping the actual controversy entirely. It was a missed opportunity to celebrate Clark's impact and position the league as the home of the sport's biggest star. Instead, safe, bureaucratic language pleased no one and only added fuel to the fire. That, more than the roster decision itself, was the real story. A commissioner who chose to defend the status quo rather than confront a controversy rooted in jealousy and gatekeeping, sending an unmistakable signal that league leadership wasn't equipped to manage the very phenomenon it had been given. Many now view it as one of the most damaging leadership failures in the WNBA's 28-year history, with financial and marketing consequences that could echo for years to come.